Good day, viewers, and welcome back to another video of Get Educated with DylanMarie. If you are just now joining us, in the last few videos, we've been educating ourselves on the truth and myths of 5 women in our segment of A Misrepresented Truth, 5 women who defined history. So far, we've learned about Queen Elizabeth I, Pocahontas, and most recently, Catherine the Great. Our 4th misrepresented woman story is filled with so many questions that history can't even decide the correct way to say or spell her name.
Sacagawea.
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 No.
I think I've made my point. Depending on your dialect and geographical area, you will see her name spelled and pronounced in several different ways. But for this video, I'll be using the pronunciation Sacagawea. No matter how you learn to pronounce her name, her story is told pretty much the same way each time. A Native American woman, daughter of a Shoshone chief, who helped guide Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery across the Continental Divide, eventually making their way to the Pacific Ocean, all the while carrying an infant child on her back. And that's about it. But that's where my knowledge ended. I mean, she seems like an adventurous, courageous woman. And although that is not untrue, the picture that I had in my mind of Sacagawea was one of a woman who volunteered for this adventure. So you can imagine my surprise when I began my research into her true history and found out that what I'd learned in school was not 100% accurate, and my idea around her volunteering for this adventure was pretty false. Let's be clear, in this video, I'm not focusing on the journey of Lewis and Clark or the controversy around the Corps of Discovery, maybe for a later video. This video will focus on the life of an incredible woman and how a lack of information has caused such a misstep in our education. We begin our story of Sacagawea in the year 1800. At the age of 12, she and other girls from her tribe were kidnapped from the Shoshone home. Their captors were part of a war party from the Hadassah tribe and took her and the others to the Hadassah Mandan village. If you look at a modern-day map, this would be from the areas around Wyoming and Idaho, all the way up to what is nowadays North Dakota. In 1804, around the age of 16, she was sold to a French-Canadian trapper, Toussaint Charbonneau. She then became his second wife and quickly became pregnant with their child. In early November of 1804, when Sacagawea was about 6 months pregnant, up the Missouri River, landing right there in Fort Mandan, came Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery. On direct orders from President Thomas Jefferson, they were looking for volunteers to help them discover a path across the Louisiana Purchase and help expand the newly founded United States of America. Her husband caught the attention of Lewis and Clark not only because he was a translator, but also because he stated he had 2 snake wives from the lands that they would have to travel through. Who knows why he chose Sacagawea over his other wife to be able to join them on this journey? Maybe Lewis and Clark felt that having a mother with a young child would help display peaceful intentions to the other tribes as they passed through their lands. Maybe they saw that she had great skill and could be of use and benefit along the way. Or maybe Charbonneau decided she was coming, and since she was his wife and a woman, she didn't really have a choice. Either way, when it came to the idea I had of Sacagawea volunteering for this journey, it seems as if she was more voluntold. On February 11th, 1805, her son, John Baptiste, or Little Pompey, was born. And not even 2 months later, on April 7th, she strapped him to her back and headed out with her husband, Lewis and Clark, and the Corps of Discovery. And it was a good thing she was there, too. Within their first month of traveling up the Missouri River, everything almost came to a halt. While during a storm, and due to Charbonneau's poor direction of a boat, many important items fell overboard and started floating down the river, including Lewis's first year of journals. Lewis writes that in that moment, all of the men panicked as they watched their stuff floating away. Sacagawea, however, calmly jumped into action, and she immediately began fishing items out of the water. She pretty much saved everything. She also taught the men of the Corps how to make their own clothes, what to eat, and what to hunt. And she did all that while at the same time nursing and taking care of her less than 6-month-old baby. Now that's a badass woman right there. However, the journey for our hero almost ended on June 10th, 1805, when Sacagawea became deathly ill. Lewis writes in his journals that after days of extreme illness, he had her drink sulfur water from the area of the Great Falls, which is now modern-day Montana. Thankfully, the water seemed to help, and within days she was healed and they were back on the trail. Now, after leaving the Missouri River, she was within miles of her Shoshone home. And once they got there, it would be her job to negotiate for the horses they would need to cross over the mountains. After being kidnapped, enslaved, sold, and then married, she was finally back in her homeland. And upon arriving, found that her brother was the new chief of her tribe, which made it much easier to negotiate for those horses. Now, although it seems that in the beginning, Sacagawea was voluntold for this journey, at this point, she was pretty invested in its success. Or at least that's how it seems. Considering she was back in her homeland, I'm sure if she wanted to stay with the Shoshone, her brother, the chief, would have fought for her, but she mounted her horse with Pomp on her back and continued on her journey with Lewis and Clark. From there, they spent the next 53 days crossing the divide. In the last 11 of those days, they suffered from starvation, dehydration, and frostbite. Finally, on November 15th, 1805, they had done it. They had reached the Pacific Ocean. While there, Sacagawea actually accomplished another historical moment when she and Clark's slave York were the first woman and Black man on record to be given a vote in the United States of America, even though it was just on where to set up camp. Now, along with the question around the pronunciation of Sacagawea's name,
Sacagawea.
there are also several questions around how she died, when she died, and where she's currently buried. The Shoshone people actually have a memorial and gravesite to her that states that she lived until the age of 95 years old. However, it's recorded that she died in 1812 after having caught a fever. Clark was recorded to have adopted both of her children, little Pompey and her daughter Lizette, only 18 months later. There are so many questions around the life of Sacagawea, but this one thing is for certain. She was incredibly fearless and helped shape the world that we know today. There are actually more statues and monuments to Sacagawea than any other woman in American history. Heck, they even put her on money. Oh, and there's the bell. We only have one misrepresented woman left in our series. However, there are so many more stories that were not on our list. And they're not all just women either. If you have questions about something or someone in history that you'd like to get educated on, drop it in the comments. While you're down there, you can check out my favorite resources, as well as the links to the other 3 Misrepresented Women videos. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time, this is DylanMarie signing out. Stay educated, everyone.
Let her name be pronounced as many ways as it can be. But please bring forth her life as humanness.